Do you know what your worldview is? If you're unfamiliar with the term, let me explain. A worldview is a framework or set of ideas and beliefs that we use to understand the world and make sense of it. It guides our actions and helps us find meaning and purpose in life. Everyone has a worldview, whether they're aware of it or not. It's important to note that a worldview is different from culture or religion. Every worldview is founded on certain assumptions and does require a level of faith. No worldview is entirely unbiased, and any of them could be true, partially true, or entirely incorrect. Our worldview influences how and why we engage with the world around us, and it helps us shape how we answer life's biggest questions, such as what does it mean to be human, or what defines a man or a woman. On these specific questions, the cultural waters have become very muddied. What was once considered a fairly straightforward question with consensus across various people groups has now become increasingly difficult to define. When asked what a man or a woman is, a growing response is that only the individual themselves can define their gender. This is, of course, circular reasoning, but it also highlights a dramatic convergence of philosophies and worldviews happening in real time. This convergence is something theologians and philosophers refer to as a rise of expressive individualism. Wonder what that means? Well, good news. We are going to find out in this session and see how a Christian worldview leads to the flourishing of humanity. Before we delve into analyzing this significant societal change and the merging of philosophies, it's essential to establish a foundation from a biblical standpoint. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26, it is stated that God created humanity as both male and female. A noteworthy aspect of this creation is that humans are distinct from all other forms of life as they were made in the image of God. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, collectively known as the Godhead, designed humanity to reflect their nature. In this act of creation, they remained unified while exhibiting diversity. The Father is different from the Son and the Holy Spirit, and vice versa, yet all are God. God chooses to illustrate this unity and diversity within the human race by creating complementary expressions in the form of man and woman. Both man and woman individually are designed to reflect the Godhead's three-in-one nature. As humans are comprised of body, soul, and spirit, while being distinctly male and female. We are not simply physical beings, as materialists would argue, nor are we purely spiritual, as hyper-spiritualists might claim. It is also important to note that we are not just soul, personality, or intellect. We are integrated beings, intended by God to thrive in all three dimensions and to experience the beauty of God's character. Unfortunately, humanity has fallen from this place of right relationship with God and thus a right understanding of what it means to know oneself. In Genesis 3, we see that Adam and Eve disobeyed God's instruction regarding not eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent deceived and tempted both of them to step out of the place which God had provided for them. And in turn, they became their own gods, deciding for themselves what is good and what is evil. This fall from God's design for humanity can be seen in the disintegration of our threefold design. Human history has shown that instead of holding our bodies in high esteem, we give them over to dishonorable practices, as Romans 1 showcases. Not only do we dishonor our bodies, but we even use our bodies to demean others who are made in God's image. In this demeaning and disintegration of our body, we have also elevated our soul. This is seen most clearly in the philosophy of Gnosticism. Now, time wouldn't permit us to unpack all the distinctives of Gnosticism, but it's crucial to understand this worldview even at a base level in our current cultural moment. Gnosticism was one of the earliest heresies or diversions from genuine Christian teaching that the first century church faced. Gnostics believed that the true self was actually the inner self and was only held back by the much lower part of humanity, i.e. the body. Gnostics even went as far to say that there was no way that God would have come into a human body as in the incarnation, but more so as an expression, thought, or idea. This is why John the Apostle writes in 1 John chapter 4, verses 2 and 3, "By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and now is in the world already." What John is confronting here is Gnosticism and is elevating the esteem that God has for the human body. Why is it important for us to understand this in order to be effective in our work with reaching and discipling youth for the glory of Christ? It's because Gnosticism is reappearing in modern transgender theory and ideology. Today, it's generally accepted that someone can claim that they are the opposite sex trapped in their body. Their inner self, psychology, and perception don't match the body and physiology, so their inner self is promoted and takes precedence. The biological and physical aspects are expected to submit to the inner self rather than being integrated. It's even considered by some to be immoral to suggest otherwise. You might be asking, how do we get to a place where our understanding of who we are and what it means to be human became so divided? Or what does Gnosticism have to do with worldview, expressive individualism, and the hypersexualization of today? Great question. In his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, Professor Carl Trueman discusses the shift in Western society's values over time. He contrasts the past, when doing good for others was considered most important, with today's emphasis being on personal fulfillment and self-expression. Trueman explains that our great-great-grandparents may not have understood the concept of a job fulfilling them, as they saw work primarily as a means to support their families. This is a stark contrast to today's pervasive messages of you do you, live your truth, be your true self, which Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor refers to as the age of authenticity. This age of authenticity refers to a cultural shift where individuals prioritize personal fulfillment and self-expression. In this era, people are encouraged to discover and live according to their true selves, valuing sincerity and personal integrity over conforming to external norms and traditions. This emphasis on authenticity shapes modern identity and society's values, promoting the pursuit of individual uniqueness and genuine connections. According to this worldview, the purpose of life is to discover and express one's deepest self, free from the influence of family, friends, or traditional authorities. This emphasis on individual authenticity is seen as noble, while any criticism of one's self-perception is viewed as oppressive. In our modern church era, the topic of human and sexual experience has not been easily or rightly approached. It seems that people often view sex in one of three ways: as something gross, as something viewed as God or the highest human experience, or rightly as a gift. It's clear that the church's approach to this topic has evolved into one of three camps. Due to fearful and shame-based teaching, many have been left with the idea that sex is bad until a pastor miraculously waves their hands over a couple during a marriage ceremony, making it magically good. Alternatively, because of the silence surrounding this issue, many have been influenced by a culture that promotes hypersexualism, and they have a distorted view of sex and pursue it with intense fervor. Both of these views are wrong. Sex is meant to be a gift, stewarded within the context God has designed for it. It's easy for the church to blame this hypersexualization on entities like Playboy or the sexual revolution of the 1960s. However, that would be a form of circular reasoning in and of itself, as a sexual revolution cannot cause a sexual revolution. What can then? Ideas. Jesus said in John chapter 8, verse 32, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We as Bible-believing Christians who hold to the importance of orthodoxy would adhere to the fact that there is truth with a capital T, and that will lead humanity to flourish. We do, however, also have to believe that the opposite is true as well. If truth leads to freedom, then a lie will enslave you. It's easy to see that our modern generation has been enslaved to sexuality. We've culturally elevated it to the highest of human experiences. This is a concept made popular by early 1900s psychologist Sigmund Freud, an Austrian neurologist and founder of psychoanalysis. The foundation of his belief around human nature and identity was that at our roots, we are primarily sexual. Our true self would thus be our sexual self. And in his view, the only way to true liberty was the exaltation of this core nature. Freud wasn't the only one to hold this worldview. Wilhelm Reich, another Austrian psychoanalyst, came to the same conclusion about human nature. However, Reich began to explore how this perspective could mix with that of Marxist ideology. This viewpoint, named after its originator Karl Marx, saw any relationship, whether it be social, economic, or political, as a relationship between an oppressor and the oppressed. This mixture of Freudian thought with Marxism led Reich to see the religious institution of the church, with its views of sexual restraint, and the position of parents as sources of oppression and stifling to the next generation. His unashamed goal was to sideline both the church and the voice of parents for the next generation to be set free from their bonds, embracing unhindered sexual experiences however they see fit. So, what happens when expressive individualism, hypersexuality, and Marxism come together? The answer? Today. How then does the gospel speak to these thoughts and ideas? How do we as youth workers even begin to understand the shifting sands of modern human and gender identity theory, let alone communicate it to the young people we are responsible for? This is what we will dive into in our next session. Let's delve into these questions based on what we just talked about. How does the concept of expressive individualism challenge traditional understandings of identity and selfhood, particularly about gender and sexuality? In what ways does the biblical narrative of creation, specifically the distinction between male and female, offer a framework for understanding human identity and purpose? How can the resurgence of Gnosticism, particularly in modern transgender ideology, be seen as a response to societal shifts towards expressive individualism and hypersexualization? How does this challenge traditional Christian teachings? How do philosophical movements such as Freudianism and Marxism contribute to the cultural elevation of sexuality and the deconstruction of traditional societal structures? To what extent does the age of authenticity shape contemporary attitudes towards personal fulfillment and self-expression? And how does this contrast with historical perspectives on duty and responsibility?